Welcome to Impact Makers Radio, featuring industry thought leaders sharing problem-solving insights to help grow your business and live the life you love. And here's your host, Stewart Andrew Alexander.
Hi, and welcome to another Let's Talk Bankruptcy conversation. And during this segment of the show, ladies and gentlemen, I'm really excited because today I have bankruptcy attorney Lamar Hawkins, shareholder of Aiken, Schenk, Hawkins and Ricciardi PLC, calling in all the way from Phoenix, Arizona. Now, Lamar, who is considered to be a leader in the area of bankruptcy, will be talking to you today about how to get your home mortgage lender to send proper monthly statements, as well as some other interesting insights that he's going to share with us. So, if you're one of the increasing amount of individuals or companies in the Phoenix, Arizona area, and you feel that you can relate to today's topic, it might be a good idea just to down tools. Log out of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or any other kind of distraction. Maybe even grab yourself a pen and paper and get ready to take some notes as we listen in to what Lamar has to share with us today. So with that said, welcome to the show, Lamar.
Thank you. Good to be here.
You are so welcome. Okay, Lamar, let's just jump straight in with our first question of the day. Briefly, in your own words, just describe the kinds of individuals and companies who you serve and the various types of situations they find themselves in when they come to you for your help.
Thank you. This is kind of a broad spectrum issue because it impacts pretty much every individual that happens to own a home, and oftentimes companies as well that happen to have loans that are secured by real property. I have noticed over the past few years that banks and loan servicers have been getting worse and worse at providing accurate monthly statements or accounting data when it's needed and properly reporting information to the credit reporting bureaus. It would seem to most that with the federal regulations that are out there that the banks and loan servicers would be getting better at this sort of activity, but sadly they're getting worse, and it's causing people more and more problems, both inside of bankruptcy and outside of bankruptcy. Now, granted, I'm a bankruptcy lawyer, so I tend to see it more in the context of a bankruptcy setting, but I also see it outside of a bankruptcy setting as well. So there's a couple of regulations, federal regulations that are at issue for this. There's the Truth in Lending Act that's commonly referred to as TILA. People in the industry like to use acronyms because their words are too long. In the TILA regulations, there is a regulation called Regulation Z, which is known by a lot as Reg Z. In that Reg Z, servicers are required to provide periodic detailed mortgage statements to consumers. That's an actual federal requirement. Yet servicers and banks in general seem to hate doing it. And so as a result, they tend to not do it. And when the consumer is out there not receiving monthly statements, bad things start to happen with their loans, which they're commonly not even aware of happening until really bad things happen, like a notice of trustee sale, for instance, because somebody's trying to foreclose on their house. But pursuant to the Reg Z requirements, the mortgage statements must contain, and this isn't a may, this is a must contain past payment breakdown that includes the total of all payments made since the last statement and a breakdown of how the most recent payment was applied to principal, interest, and escrow. What commonly happens is lenders receive payments and they apply the money however they feel like applying it, whether it's in compliance with the loan or not. And if they don't give proper monthly reporting, the consumer out there dutifully making their payments doesn't even know that the lender's taking their money and applying it maybe to a whole bunch of fees and charges that they're not even entitled to be charging the consumer. And so they're not applying them to the principal and interest like they're supposed to on the loan. And as a result, defaults are happening when the consumer doesn't even know. The statements that they're supposed to send are also supposed to include a total of all payments received from the beginning of the calendar year and show how those payments have been applied, the information or partial payments placed in suspense or unapplied accounts, various types of accounting information, delinquency information, and importantly, a contact information for somebody at the servicer for the consumer to call when they look at the statement and recognize things are horribly wrong. Unfortunately, again, the servicers and banks are not doing this like they're supposed to.
So it goes without saying that anything you share with us today is not legal advice or legal assistance. It's purely for the purpose of sharing information. Now, with that said, I am sure that you come across many misconceptions, myths, untruths, things which people believe to be true. Maybe they've been online and done some research and they found some information and they come to you and in their hearts and minds believe them to be true. However, you know that they are not true and you have to spend time and energy debunking those myths before you can actually get to helping that client. So with that said, and it's rather a long-winded way of just saying, what's the most common misconception that you come across while you're out there working with those individuals and organizations then, Lamar?
I would say the most common one is, because it's said not just by servicers and banks, but by their counsel to people all the time, once a person files bankruptcy, the bank or loan servicer no longer is required to send monthly statements, and so they don't send monthly statements anymore. They take that as a given that they just don't have to do it. That's actually not what the regulation says. The regulation says that after a person's filed bankruptcy, they can request that statements continue, simple, in a letter, simple request, and the loan servicer or bank is then supposed to continue to send the monthly statements. Now, the excuse that the bank or servicer will give is, well, you're in bankruptcy, and if I send you a statement, maybe I'm violating the automatic stay, which is the stay that prohibits creditors from trying to collect against people when they file bankruptcy. But the exclusion to that very point is when the individual requests to receive the statements, they should send it. Because what tends to happen once the person files bankruptcy, let's say you got your house and you were making your payments timely and you're completely current, you file bankruptcy, they stop sending statements. You're used to sending payments in when you receive a statement. So what tends to happen is you miss a couple of payments because you never got a statement. And people just tend to not remember to send their payments without receiving the statement. So it's a common practice for me and for those that care about it to have that request sent to the lender and impress upon them that the federal reg actually requires them to send the monthly statement, particularly because this individual wants to continue to pay because they've always been current on the loan.
Okay, Lamar, so let's keep in mind what you just shared with us and keeping your client's confidentiality in mind, of course. Please share an example of how you've helped someone, an individual or an organization that came to you with those challenges that you just described, that misconception, and what kind of transformational results you were able to gain for them.
Well, for me, where it commonly happens, because I'm catching it early on in the system, and I'm getting the statements triggered to my clients to be able to continue to receive them. Another thing that happens a lot with lenders is they start sending through, I would call them in quotes, charges on an account with a code referencing a charge that frankly is gibberish to a normal person looking at a bank statement. And so when they look at that bank statement, it says, charge for $120 for, item Z or something. And that consumer doesn't know any better. So they send a payment in based upon that, thinking that this must be some appropriate charge that happens while I'm in bankruptcy. So they just pay it. Well, one of the requirements of the reg is that the bank's statements actually put information on the statement that is understandable by anyone. So when you get that weird statement in with a weird charge, immediately sending through a request to explain what this charge is to get to the bottom of whatever it is this bank is now trying to tag the individual for. It could be really bizarre things like property inspection fees or bank oversight charges, or things that just frankly oftentimes make absolutely no sense, because we know that the bank never came to their house and inspected anything, yet suddenly they're getting a charge of $100 for some kind of amorphous inspection. Now, the reg requires those things to be explained. There's also a companion regulation to it that comes under the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. That's commonly acronymed as RESPA. It's got a regulation code X, because apparently code Z wasn't exciting enough. We had to have a code X also. Regulation X requires additional disclosures, and it requires that the servicers maintain policies and procedures that meet very important objectives of accurate and timely information. And the best part about it for the consumer is the timely correction of errors. So, for example, when that servicer sends through that ridiculous charge that makes absolutely no sense, and you finally get to the bottom of what it's actually about, you then under Reg Z can say to the servicer or bank, hey, you aren't entitled to charge this. It's an error. Take it off my account, and you must take it off of my account immediately. Also, that same Reg X requires the annual escrow account review and reconciliation that most of us are used to seeing when we're not in bankruptcy. But miraculously, when somebody files bankruptcy, they stop doing all the escrow account reconciliation. So in a normal reconciliation, they show money coming in from a payment. Then they show payments going out for insurance or taxes. And those things should match up really directly. But what tends to happen once somebody hits bankruptcy is the lender, accidentally, and I put that in huge quotes, pilfers money that was in the escrow account and uses it for purposes other than the escrow account was intended for. But when you get an escrow account reconciliation, it's pretty easy to spot those erroneous charges and to, again, say, hey, you aren't entitled to receive this. This is an error. You must go in and fix this. And the individual is entitled to receive those escrow reconciliations once a year, but they're also, under the regulation, entitled to ask the servicer or lender or bank for account data whenever it's necessary for them to receive it. Now, that happens all the time for everybody, when they're sitting out there in the world when it comes to tax time. And you normally would get that nice little statement that tells you, here's how much we paid in interest, and here's how much we paid in taxes. We care about that because those are deductible items on our tax return. And we commonly don't receive those statements when somebody files bankruptcy. And so you got to request those from the lender. And at the time of requesting them, and you look at the numbers and you realize they're way wrong, now you know you've got an error in your account. And so you ask for detailed information. And under the Reg X and Reg Z, the lender is required to provide the detailed information and fix any errors as those errors are identified. Now, the real interesting thing is that there's actually timelines on when the servicer is supposed to be responding. When you send through that request to them, they're supposed to acknowledge the request within 5 days. My personal perspective is it's a miracle if they respond to it in 5 days, but they will usually acknowledge the request at some period of time. They also have a requirement that they respond to the request itself, not just acknowledging its existence, but actually responding to it within 30 days, or they can seek up to 45 days if the information is really detailed and will take them a long time to generate. Candidly, I don't think I've ever seen a lender that could get something done in 30 days. And so it seems like they commonly need the extra time, but at a maximum, they're supposed to have that information to you in 45 days. But as a reality, it is pulling teeth to get them to give the information and to get them to fix the errors when the time comes. And it's even worse when you've got time lag because the consumer sitting out there in bankruptcy has the impression and belief that the lender holds all the cards and can bully them as much as they want, and they just dutifully make their payments thinking that they're doing what they're supposed to do, and it turns out the lender is charging them a bunch of stuff they're not supposed to charge them. And as a result, that poor consumer has made all these payments without really knowing what he should have paid, and it turns out paid a bunch of things that he really shouldn't have paid.
Okay, that is a great case study. Thank you for going into so much detail and sharing so many great insights for us there, Lamar. So as a reminder, today we are talking about how to get your home mortgage lender to send proper monthly statements and properly report to credit reporting bureaus. Now, with that in mind, and for those individuals and companies wanting to know more, what's the most common but unknown pitfall they need to let's say they need to avoid regardless of what situation they find themselves in, please?
That kind of gets us to the credit reporting aspect of all this, because everything ends up sooner or later on a credit report. And unfortunately, our society seems to be very driven in the credit world by what the credit report says. but the statistics of the level of errors that exist on credit reports is staggering. You would think that they'd be very accurate, but sadly, they're very inaccurate. So whether a person's in bankruptcy or out of bankruptcy, the overall you really should always do it kind of rule about this is everybody should always be monitoring their credit report. Now, there is a free website to go to in order to get your credit report from all three credit reporting bureaus. Ironically, it's called annualcreditreports.com. That website, annualcreditreports.com, was set up by a mandate from Congress, and you can once a year go on and get your credit report for free, meaning nothing. You get it for free. And when you get it, you can go through it and you can dispute whatever is wrong on it. And invariably, people, even if they're nowhere near a bankruptcy court, will go onto that website, look at their credit report, and realize there's a whole bunch of errors on their credit report. And they should go in and dispute every single one of those errors at that time. Now, what tends to happen, though, with somebody who files bankruptcy is they think in their mind, well, I've heard bankruptcy just obliterates my credit score anyway, so why bother checking my credit report? Well, the reality of it is they should be checking their credit report just as much, if not more, than somebody that hasn't filed bankruptcy. And they should be going on the website as well and checking to see if there's any errors on their report and fixing and disputing any errors that are on their report. Now, there's lots and lots of websites around the country and lots of phone calls you get from people volunteering to fix your credit report for a fee. And frankly, the fees are usually staggering. But the fixing of the credit report is something anybody could do on their own with just a little bit of patience and a little bit of effort. Well, let me emphasize a lot of patience and a lot of effort. But it's the same thing that you would be paying several $1,000s to somebody else to do for you. You can do it for yourself, going to that annualcreditreports.com website. Now, let me emphasize, there's the exact same industry creating an exact same website that's called freecreditreports.com. Ironically, freecreditreports.com charges you for your credit report. A little bit of nuance, a little bit of, really whose game is this? I'm not a big fan of that website because I think it's very misleading to the consumer. Don't go to freecreditreports.com because they actually charge you for the credit report. Go to the one that's actually free, that was mandated by Congress. But anyway, in the process of that bankruptcy proceeding, and well after the bankruptcy proceeding, as those banks and servicers are giving out faulty monthly statements, they are likewise putting faulty credit report information on your credit report. There's a Fair Credit Reporting Act. There's the abbreviation of that of FCRA. It isn't a fun-sounding acronym, so people just tend to refer to it as the Fair Credit Reporting Act, that actually requires lenders to fix credit reports when they're wrong. But notoriously, lenders don't care. And when you go and dispute it, again, lenders don't care that your credit report is wrong. They only care what they have to do. So you have to go in and dispute incorrect data to force them to fix it. Ultimately, there's an opportunity to sue if they just won't do it, but hopefully you never get to that point. Hopefully it's resolved by just going on the website and fixing the incorrect data. But everybody should continue to do that while they're in bankruptcy, after bankruptcy, and even if they're nowhere near the bankruptcy court steps, because credit scores really do drive what happens to us in our lives, whether it's buying a house, buying a car, even some leasing companies for renting apartments will look at your credit score to see if you're a good credit risk as they're thinking to rent something to you. So you should always be monitoring your credit report and trying to get your credit score to be as high as it possibly can. And that's the way to do it.
Fantastic. So, Lamar, one of the reasons why we invited you to come on the show is because of the reputation you have on an individual basis and for the company who you work with. So very, very briefly, how many years have you actually been a bankruptcy attorney? Just how long?
Well, you should never ask a man his age.
Too late.
Maybe that's a woman. In fact, it dates me. Let's just say I'm 25 plus years. So it's been a long time.
Right. So 25 plus years in the industry. So would it be safe to say that you've helped hundreds of individuals and companies, or a combination of the both, in that 25-year plus span? Right. So
Yeah, it's very, very much so.
with that said then, Lamar, if you can just imagine, maybe it's any morning of the week, you're just falling out of bed, the alarm clock has gone off, whether you use one or not, but you're falling out of bed and you've got a full day's work ahead of you, helping those individuals and organizations who find themselves in that unfortunate position where they're maybe looking at bankruptcy right in front of them. So in a situation like that, how do you actually feel on a morning? Are you still motivated after hundreds of cases and 25 plus years in the industry? How do you feel on a day like that then, Lamar?
Working on the consumer side of life or the business side, because we do both consumer and business cases, it is very rewarding to be able to look around town and see all of the companies that I've reorganized around town that are remaining successful companies and doing really well. It's very rewarding to have a long list of former clients who are now happily moving on with their lives, having gotten over a really horrific event at some point in their life. Because for most people, bankruptcy becomes a last option after very horrible experiences, and they really do want to move on with their lives into a better life. And it's a rewarding thing to be able to do that. And for instance, in the Chapter 11 world, which is the reorganizing kind of bankruptcy, our confirmation rate is above 90%, which is way above the industry standard, which means if I like you as a client enough that I want to take you as a client, you're going to be successful in the process, and I am happy that I can be able to reorganize companies and keep them good, profitable ventures in the Phoenix market for years to come. Very rewarding.
Tell us a little bit about yourself, and especially in terms of your background, your formal education, and your experience as it relates to the topic of bankruptcy.
Well, personally, I am a local born and bred individual. I'm actually a native Phoenician. There's maybe 3 of us in the entire city because everybody seems to have come from someplace cold. But grew up here. I am a product of our local universities. I'm an ASU graduate, both an undergraduate for accounting and my law school experience at ASU's law school. I've been practicing with my firm now ever since I graduated from law school, and I've been with the same firm the entire time since I became an attorney. And like I said before, it's 25 plus years. It's actually more, but I just don't want to admit how many more. From a professional setting, I've been doing bankruptcy types of things for my entire career. I have been and presently am the chair of the Bankruptcy Specialist Certification Committee for the State Bar of Arizona. So our committee is charged with the process of certifying attorneys as specialists in the bankruptcy world. That's been very rewarding to be able to bring that opportunity to the world. We also do volunteer work that comes through the Maricopa County Bar Association. So volunteer issues don't come directly to me. They have to go through Maricopa County for that to happen. But we find very much enjoyment on helping out the more needy of the world in that regard. And in my career, I have done mostly debtor side, whether it's in insolvency, a workout, a bank negotiation, a bankruptcy, anywhere along the spectrum of life difficulties with any kind of credit situation. But I've been mostly on the debtor side of cases. I do have people in my staff that do the creditor side of cases. I personally find the debtor side more rewarding. That's why I tend to stay on it and continue to enjoy that aspect. I probably will work until the day I die because I just enjoy what I do that much. And hopefully that will be a good 50 years from now. So we shall see.
Yeah, well, hopefully it will be 50 and 50 healthy ones. I think it's great that you're out there having such a positive impact on people in your local and possibly even on a national level. Do you work remotely as well then, Lamar, or is it just locally?
We will occasionally do something that has impact in other states. Bankruptcy tends to be a local function,
right.
And so it tends to be that there's more local businesses. But there are many times when there's a national company that has a local impact, and so we will provide that kind of assistance to them. Or I may have a local company that's become regional or national, and so I will continue to work with them after they have become successful, maybe going through a bankruptcy process and continuing on with their business life in the future. Because we don't just end our relationship with them when they complete their bankruptcy process. We continue working with them for their foreseeable future.
So let's just talk briefly about other companies then, Lamar. So, for example, if there's someone out there now, they're listening in, they've been listening for the past 20, 30 minutes or so, and they are looking at their options for taking on the service of somebody like yourself, a bankruptcy attorney. What would be one or two questions they should ask that professional to help them determine whether to move forward with them or not?
Ooh, one or two questions? I'd have about 3,000 questions.
I know, that's why I said one or two, and we are limited by time. So,
maybe the best first question to ask anybody, especially if it's a company, is to find out what their success ratio is.
Right.
It's easily determinable, but most people that don't have very good success will never talk about it. Mm-hmm. I will immediately talk about it because we have a 90% confirmation rate of our cases. And so somebody else, and the industry standard, I think, is somewhere around 40 to 50%. So somebody else might have a 20 or 30%. They're not going to talk about that. So that would be the first question I'd ask is, how successful are you at getting people through the process so they can be successful on the other side? Mm-hmm. And if their percentage either won't be said or is a really low number, you might want to move on. Because there are people out there that do much better work and have a much better success ratio.
Okay. And what would be one more question that they could ask?
Well, if they're a consumer, I would ask for referrals, because if you are good as an attorney, your former clients will talk you up well. Right. And so if somebody's going to try to find somebody and they can't give them a single former client as a referral, they probably shouldn't be working with them. Because there should be a very long list of people. Or maybe look at, even these days, we can look at everybody on the web and just see all the information in the world about them and look at their reviews. Look at what's happening to them on the internet, because then you'll know if they have good success or bad.
Great tips, Lamar. Thank you so much for that. Unfortunately, we are out of time. So finally, if there is somebody out there who wants to know more about how to get their home mortgage lender to send proper monthly statements and to properly report to credit reporting bureaus. If there's someone out there who's listening right now, what's the quickest way for them to find you? How would they get in touch with you, Lamar?
Phone number is real easy, 602-248-8203. Just ask for me. If I'm not here, you'll get my staff. They will always be talking to you. Or email is fine too, dlh@ashrlaw.com. Very accessible by email as well. Mm-hmm. We try to get back to clients within that day, because usually people have crisis situations when they're calling. Mm-hmm. And so we like to respond to crisis very quickly.
Right, Lamar, I'm just going to ask you to repeat your phone number again, but this time just a little bit slower and more deliberate. I know you know it off by heart, but there may be someone driving in the car and they're asking their wife to take down your number. So if you could just repeat it to us again, just a little bit slower, so that people will be able to pick that up real quick and jump on the phone and give you a call.
Sure. 602-248-8203.
That is perfect. So that's all we have time for today. The time has flown by, and I'm sure that we've only begun to scratch the surface of how Lamar can help us today. But again, let me just remind you, it was Bankruptcy Attorney Lamar Hawkins. Thank you so much for sharing so generously with us today, Lamar. You have certainly demonstrated that you are a true educator and advocate for your client's success. So thank you.
Thank you, Stewart.
You're so welcome, Lamar. And I'd also like to say a big thank you to you, the listener. Thank you for joining us on this very insightful and informative discussion with one of the leading bankruptcy attorneys in Phoenix, Arizona today. Again, his name was Lamar Hawkins. Do remember him, give him a call, check him out, send him an email. Whatever you decide to do, you are going to be in a great place to take your first steps towards addressing your current situation. So that's it, folks. My name is Stewart Andrew Alexander, and we'll be back shortly with some more leading bankruptcy professionals in this, our series of Let's Talk Bankruptcy Conversations. So, until then, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk real soon.
Thank you for tuning in to Impact Makers Radio. To listen to all past, present and future industry thought leaders and trendsetters, visit us at impactmakersradio.com.